This isn't reality anymore. You can be completely normal, calm, decent, and then you get in your car and suddenly something takes over. And it's not just the road. What if that feeling is being triggered, amplified, designed? Because we're living in a world built on logic, algorithms, and reason, and somehow it's making us more unreasonable than ever. So I started asking, why does everything feel so off? Why does everything feel so extreme? And more importantly, who or what is actually behind it? That's what led to my new book, The Age of Something Other Than Reason, where I break this down through poetry, satire, and perspectives that aren't always my own. Some are human, some aren't, like one poem where Earth becomes a reality show watched by extraterrestrials, or another that captures what doomscrolling feels like inside your head. And what I realized is this: we're not just reacting to the world anymore. We're in a constant state of rage against the machines, systems designed to make us lock in and react. If you've ever felt like reality doesn't make sense anymore, you're not crazy. We're living in it, the age of something other than reason. What I started feeling, which I think a lot of people in modern American culture are feeling right now, is a rage. How I would describe that rage is we all become somebody different when we're driving in our cars, right? So we all get behind the wheel, and no matter how nice and kind we are, someone pulls out in front of you or cuts you off or is going too slow, and you're in your car swearing and and you just feel this odd rage that you don't feel, in your normal everyday non-driving, life. But that feeling I started to feel all the time. I think because of all of the systems, right, of modern American culture that I'm actually writing about in the book. Part of the dichotomy, I think, of the book is that I'm trying to explain how we're living in the age of something other than reason, yet a lot of the things that are creating that age are based in reason themselves. So algorithms, right? I mean, those are things that are coded, and that's done completely using logic and reason. Yet the outcome of how they affect us really is making us many times more unreasonable. Humans are using systems of reason and implementing the tools of reason, but that is resulting in the way they affect humans and us being more unreasonable. Some of the specific poems that really surprised me, there's one called Resolvazole that's written through the voice of an extraterrestrial. In this poem, Earth has become the reality television show that, is being watched by this, extraterrestrial civilization. An alien announcer, announcing a new episode basically of Earth, that they're all getting ready to watch, and then throwing off to some commercials, right? Which, I heard in a very, American culture style commercial voice, trying to sell these products in the poem. One of them being Resolvazole. What's trying to be sold to the viewers, the extraterrestrial viewers, really also encapsulates things that I find, absurd about modern American culture. The age of something other than reason is really about looking at the dark side of American culture. When I'm writing about the dark side of American culture, I'm looking at it through a lens of observation. I might not be the voice that you're reading the poem from, even if I'm using a pronoun like I. Sometimes I'm getting into the head of somebody who maybe sees a situation a little bit differently than I do. Maybe they see it in a more extreme way than I do. And that does happen in the new book, The Age of Something Other Than Reason, because we are living really in an age of extremes. So when I say I'm writing this from an observer, I am an observer, but sometimes I'm also part of the problem, or I'm consuming the systems that are making me feel that way. Like I am personally being affected by algorithms. I'm personally being affected by doom scrolling. Yes, I do that sometimes. And you will find, things in this book about both, poems in this book about both of those concepts. Also the urge that we all have to take bait online, when we see a comment on something on some kind of social media. For instance, I know that, let's say, when somebody famous now dies, say there's a post about it, there is just an army of bots putting laughing emojis. My mind went to, who are these people? Who are these people who are out there laughing at somebody dying? That's really disgusting. As I did more and more observation, um, I think I was able to get to a new place because after seeing so much of it now, I don't immediately lose faith, right, in Americans when I see that because, I've come to realize, sure, maybe there's like a rogue idiot now and then, laughing at somebody's death online, but these are not people. Right? These are bots. This is an army of bots. They're programmed to do something so disgusting, right? To encourage us, to rage bait us into getting into arguments, right? And then because we're getting into arguments with these bots, we can trade comments with them, which boosts that post. I have tried, in recent years to not participate in that, but sometimes it's really hard, or sometimes you just can't help it. So I'm not preaching at you here because I struggle with this myself. And sometimes I have my fingers, on the keyboard and I'm clacking away, right? Like, and then at the last minute, I'll be like, there's no point in this. I'll delete the comment. So another poem that's featured in The Age of Something Other Than Reason is called Dead Sea Scrolls. And Sea Scrolls is not, spelled as in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the actual scroll that you would, open up. It is actually spelled SEE. So this poem really is about, doom scrolling. The way that I hear it in my head is, being read inside of maybe a dark, open cave, right, with a lot of echo. So, as the title of the book suggests, I think the current state of American culture is difficult for me because it's just so unreasonable about almost absolutely everything. So when I'm asked, who does this book give permission to speak? Um, Really, I'm looking to connect to people who have that same feeling, people who are watching, maybe watching the news and just thinking to themselves, why? Like, why am I hearing these things over and over? Everything just seems so unreasonable. The poems are definitely snapshots, but they are snapshots of larger conversations, algorithms, hypocrisy, lack of principles, where we're just arguing one side or the other without ever stating what our principles are. um, Religious, political fanaticism. People, I think, are identifying certain culprits in our culture. Let's say there's a debate on a specific topic, and nobody is really focusing on the actual facts, right? They're just going to their corners, right? And they're fighting from bullet points, on a page from one of their bosses or one of their, organizations they belong to who's trying to dictate, what they say. And that can turn into nonsensical debate. So when I hear something like that, I hear poetry in it, right? Because I'm hearing what what is wrong here? I identified there's something wrong here. There's something that's being missed. And what I'm hearing is a lot of blabber, right, that's not addressing, the state of facts or the actual problem. When you're writing a book and trying to capture, modern American culture, those are the moments that I hear poetry in. The poem that comes to me is not about what the people were debating or arguing about. It's about the feeling of frustration that I had while listening to it. That's why I'm calling this pop poetry, right? Because I know that one of my readers is going to read one of these poems and say, aha, me too. The term pop poetry is used in different ways by different people. Um, I am not using it, right, in the way that is talking about refrigerator magnet poetry, right? Or what some people might call Instagram poetry. I'm really thinking about what would somebody enjoy, what topics would somebody enjoy reading about or hearing about that are relevant to right now? I wrote The Age of Something Other Than Reason with the intention, right, to appeal to both poetry readers and non-poetry readers, people who maybe think that poetry isn't for them. I am doing that by not only writing about what's current, but also by, I think, expanding the concept of poetry itself. So, one thing that I don't like in any regard is boundaries. so, so I don't want someone to tell me what poetry is or isn't, and I don't want to tell you what poetry is or isn't. I can only tell you like what I find poetry in. When I say I hear poetry in everyday things, really, it's not the surface of what I'm hearing, it's the idea of what it's conveying to me. The ideas can come to me through anything. They can come to me through the news, through social media, through scientific journals, through nature. And for all of these reasons, is why I'm calling it pop poetry. I'm really just saying I'm in the popular culture, my head is in that space, and that's where this writing is coming from. There are even some poems in the new book written in modern linguistic styles, Gen Z or Gen Alpha slang and algo-speak. There's a poem in the book called Shadow Band, and that is the one that is written in 100% algo-speak. Algo-speak being the language that people use to try to trick censors so algorithms don't suppress their social media. It's a big part of the online American culture right now because people want their media to be seen. They want their words, their thoughts, their opinions to be heard, but the algorithms are definitely suppressing certain words. And so they're having to almost write this weird form of verbal poetry themselves while they're speaking. And so I thought that would be a really good thing to capture in a poem, in a book that's mirroring and about observing modern day American culture. When you're looking at, the absurdity of, modern American culture, sometimes the only appropriate thing you can do is laugh, and that depends on the topic and maybe what given day it is. And maybe today I can laugh about something that I won't be able to laugh about tomorrow. Maybe I can laugh about it the next day. But humor is really a coping mechanism. And when there is a certain feeling of powerlessness about something, which I think many people are having, um, because there are just a lot of things that we can't control. There are a lot of human emotions that can be used to cope with that feeling of powerlessness, one of which is humor. And sometimes the best thing you can do to the absurd is mock it. So there is one poem in the book. It's called Eric the Red. And that sounds like the Viking, but Eric the Red is actually spelled Read, and it's Eric with a C, not Eric with a K. This poem is actually, through the voice of a drag queen doing a drag queen reading, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's not a drag queen story hour. It is, being read for filth. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's, when you're sort of put in your place. Why this fits so well, I think, in the book is because, like I said, I find poetry in everything. And there is even an art form, right, to the words that are meant to roast somebody. I'm not gonna give it away, but, sort of the topic, why the drag queen who is sort of the "I" in this poem, um, has chosen to roast Eric with the C. The book is many different things. So one of the things the book is dystopian, and there is a thread throughout the book, a dystopian thread that's really told through the consciousness of an AI, right? And that's the part of the book that's, absolutely fiction, right? So a lot of the other poems I'm observing, right? I'm translating them, and then throughout the book, there's this dystopian thread of the story that's coming through an AI consciousness. One of my main inspirations behind writing this book was looking to other art forms. And one of those art forms that I found was this post World War II theater movement called the theater of the absurd, which really focused a lot on the lack of meaning or purpose in human existence. Now, that's not what this book is about. It's not about lack of meaning or purpose. It's really about the lack of reason. But I was finding inspiration from the theater of the absurd, and that is actually, how this new book ended up being structured like a play. It's structured in 3 acts and an intermission, which gives readers a breather from the absurd. Because I thought it was important to not just write about the absurd and sort of where we might be heading, in American culture, but to show what and demonstrate through my other writing what, could be missed if we only focus on those things. Not too long ago, I traveled back to my hometown for the funeral of a friend's mother. At that funeral, I was hearing from a lot of different people, about what her mother was like throughout her life, what she was like, closer to the end. And I was really thinking a lot on my drive home, and these words just started coming to me. And immediately when I got home, I wrote a poem, for my friend about the situation called Bloom. And the intermission section of the book is really a break from sort of the craziness and absurdity of modern American culture and more a focus on what we stand to lose if maybe some changes aren't made to that. So while it is dystopian, it really also captures those human feelings that we stand to lose if we don't find a way to hold on to them. I think it's still important to be creative and to put things out into the world, even when the world feels overwhelming, because we can't control everything, but we definitely control what we put into the world, right? And so there's a poem in the book, and I'm certain that the lawyer in me named this poem called The Right to Remain Creative, because that's a right that we all have, in our lives. And I think that creative expression gives us power over what we want to communicate. It can bring awareness to the things that we think are important. It can highlight our personal causes, or just gives us the opportunity to convey what it is that we want to convey to others. So for those who feel like they've been shifted into an alternate reality, like I do at times, I think what the book does is it captures the essence of why we have that feeling. We can take the cognitive dissonance maybe and act as sort of a medicine or an antidote, to that. I can go back and look at what I've written and remind myself as to why it is that I'm feeling that way. The unreasonableness that I'm seeing, the algorithms, the fact that people are coming or are viewing the world through a completely different set of eyes that's foreign to me. Whatever the issue is, I think this book helps me and hopefully will help others diagnose those reasons for why we're feeling this way.